Now we'll start transport and plants. It's a very small chapter, and there's nothing much to cover about it, except for a few new concepts that we'll do. Rest of the chapter, I believe, कि आप लोगों ने you have already covered it from your O levels. So let's do the internal structure of plants, which you should be quite familiar with because I believe that you have studied all these structures in your O levels. So starting off, so basically this is the internal structure of plant, okay, or the internal structure of leaf. Basically, like you can see that they have pointed out that this is a leaf and this is the magnified version of the entire plant of
वो
the entire
निकालते हैं
leaf.
चश्मे वाला.
So the first layer of the leaf is cuticle. So cuticle is just your waxy cuticle. It's a waxy substance and it's there to prevent water loss. So there are not much questions that come up for internal structure of plant. Rather, there are other questions that I'll point out that you need to cover. We are just doing this because it's a part of your syllabus and it's also written in your Mary Jones if you're following it. So we'll do the internal structure briefly. Where the first part of the leaf is cuticle and it's present there to prevent water loss during high temperatures. Then beneath cuticle, we have upper epidermis. So epidermis is basically divided into two categories, upper epidermis and lower epidermis. Okay? This part right after cuticle is your upper epidermis, and we'll do lower epidermis afterwards. So upper epidermis is there to allow sunlight to reach to the mesophyll. So mesophyll is right below the epidermis, and we have two categories of mesophyll as well. One of them is palisade mesophyll, other one is spongy mesophyll. So mesophyll is basically the site of photosynthesis, as this part of the leaf has the most chloroplast. Okay? So this is why epidermis is positioned in such a way that it allows sunlight to reach palisade mesophyll cells. And then palisade mesophyll cells, for this you need to just remember for P1s that how do they usually ask this question that how palisade mesophyll differs from a spongy mesophyll. So basically they have the same function, but there's a slight difference between both of them. That one of them, the palisade mesophyll cells, it's more like a columnar shape. Yani it has columns within its shape, so it has a columnar shape, while your spongy mesophyll is an irregular shape structure, and it also is a site of photosynthesis. But the main site of photosynthesis is always going to be palisade mesophyll cells. So if they ask you to write that which of the following is the main site of photosynthesis, then you need to opt for palisade mesophyll because palisade mesophyll has the most chloroplast. Okay? So remember this fact about palisade mesophyll that it is the main site of photosynthesis. Then we have spongy mesophils, which are right below the palisade mesophyll cells, and you can see this. The difference between both of them is that this spongy mesophyll cell, it has an irregular shape, while palisade mesophyll cells are in a columnar shape. Okay. Then your spongy mesophyll cells, they also contain chloroplast, but the quantity of chloroplast in spongy mesophyll cells is less than the palisade mesophyll cells. And the other function of spongy mesophyll cells. So usually a question comes for 2 marks in which you have to write down the function of spongy mesophyll cells. So you'll write that it is a site of photosynthesis, and number two that it has air spaces for the circulation of carbon dioxide. So you can see that there are gaps in between spongy mesophyll cells. So these gaps are the air spaces which allow CO2 to move inside, and CO2, like we all know, it's an important component of photosynthesis. Okay? So this is why spongy mesophyll cells allow the movement of CO2 inside the mesophyll cells. So you need to remember this word air spaces. It's an important keyword. And the other function of spongy mesophyll cells is to carry out photosynthesis. Then we have lower epidermis. So lower epidermis, you need to remember that it has a stroma for gas exchange. Okay, and we'll do the function of stroma in transpiration. So do not worry about it. But just remember for now, just remember the fact the lower epidermis has stroma, and stroma allows gas exchange. Okay. Then we have vascular bundle. So majority of the questions that you'll see will be for vascular bundle in this entire chapter. And you need to remember your vascular bundle is the combined bundle of xylem and phloem. So whenever xylem and phloem are combined, we call it a vascular bundle. And we need to remember basic function of xylem. As for now, okay, xylem conducts water while phloem is responsible to conduct sugars. So basically the process of translocation, we'll do translocation as well. So the process of translocation is the responsibility of phloem, while the conduction of water is the responsibility of xylem. ठीक है, so this is the internal structure of leaf. Now we need to, acha. So the more questions that I have usually seen is that they ask you to draw a cross-sectional plane diagram of dipod stem. Okay, so there's a difference when you'll be asked to identify. Well, when we do past papers, you'll be able to understand more. But just remember that there are few differences between stem and a leaf. Okay, and they ask sometimes to identify or to differentiate between the stem and a leaf. So I'll let you know the differences when we'll do the past paper, because then we'll be able to see the clear picture. But remember that they can ask you to draw a diagram of stem. They can ask you to draw a diagram of the leaf. So you'll have to draw the internal structure of leaf. Okay? You'll not draw a leaf like this. You cannot draw a leaf like this. Okay? You need to draw the internal structure, which we have just discussed about. And sometimes they ask you to draw stem. So you'll draw stem in this manner. Okay, so this is an important picture. And there will be some identification points which we'll cover while doing past papers. So for stem, remember the pehla part is epidermis. Then right after epidermis, we have collenchyma. And after collenchyma, we have parenchyma. So I know you cannot see the difference between collenchyma and parenchyma. And that is perfectly fine because both of them are interlinked with one another. And you just need to remember, okay, right after epidermis, there is this region which is known as cortex. And in cortex, you have collenchyma before parenchyma. Okay, so if they ask you to label collenchyma and parenchyma, then just remember in this mnemonic, okay, ECP. You need to identify or you need to label it as per ECP. E is the first covering, which is the epidermis. Right after epidermis, we have collenchyma. And right after collenchyma, we have parenchyma. Then we have this vascular bundle. So vascular bundle in a stem is in such a manner that xylem is pointed inwards while phloem is pointed outwards in a stem. But this is an inverse case for the leaf. Leaf may you'll find xylem before phloem. Okay, this is the only difference that will help you to identify between a stem and a leaf while we do past papers of P1. Okay, this is usually a question of P1 where you need to identify between a stem and a leaf. So just remember this fact, the xylem in a stem is pointed inwards while the phloem in a stem is pointed outwards. Okay, and in a combined manner, you call this as a vascular bundle. Acha, right after vascular bundle, you have a pith. So you need to remember if they ask you to label this diagram for 4 marks in P2 and they ask you to differentiate between stem and a leaf in P1s. Okay? So वैसे तो they do not ask you the function of collenchyma, but we have stated it over here. So collenchyma is basically there to provide strength to the stem because stem is a very strong structure. So the strength of stem is determined by collenchyma, and then parenchyma is there. It's a thin structure, and it is a thin structure. It's metabolically very active. And it's metabolically very active because it stores food within it. Okay, so it's responsible for catabolism and anabolism. And then sometimes they give you this question, okay, a thin cell walled structure which is metabolically very active, it is known as, so you need to identify it as parenchyma. Okay, so then we have xylem. Xylem, obviously, we have already studied about xylem in our O levels. So it's not easy, it's not difficult to identify. It has this deposition of lignin. It's dead structure and it provides mechanical support to plant and allows it's also a hollow structure. So since it's hollow from inside, it allows easy conduction of water and there's just no hindrance while the water is being conducted through xylem. Okay. So one of the keywords when when you write about xylem, you need to mention deposition of lignin. One, number two, mechanical support. Second keyword. Then it's a hollow structure. Hollow structure is the third keyword, and you need to link it. It's a hollow structure. This is why it allows easy conduction of water. This is going to be a fourth keyword. Okay, so you'll get quote unquote easily if you'll write all these words. Acha ji. Then we have xerophytes. So xerophytes, I believe this is a completely new concept. Whatever we have studied up till now is something you are already familiar with. So xerophytes, acha, a question usually comes on xerophytes for 4 marks. Okay. So xerophytes are basically those plants which can survive in very tough conditions, such as cactus. And you need to mention this. Okay, these are the plants which can survive in tough conditions or in adverse conditions where water is not available or there is very high temperature. So you need to describe what tough conditions could be. Tough conditions are when temperature is very high and water is not available. Okay, this is a tough condition, and how they can survive or how they can live in such adverse conditions is because they're adapted in a manner that they have very thick cuticle. So thick cuticle is there to prevent excessive water loss. Then the stomata is sunken. So stomata is not on the surface; it's really inside it's really inside the lower epidermis in order to prevent transpiration. Okay, so we'll do the function of stomata. Then you'll be able to understand okay, what I mean by sunken stomata and how it is preventing transpiration. But just understand this fact that stomata is responsible for transpiration. It allows water molecules to move outside. So since in xerophytes the stomata is present inside, it does not allow water to leave the leaf. Okay. Then it has hair-like structures, and these hair-like structures act as a barrier to loss of water, meaning it prevents loss of water. And the leaves also roll up due to shrinkage of special hinge cells. So these are the words that I've underlined. These are your keywords that you need to mention for a 4 mark question of xerophytes, that you need to mention it can survive in tough conditions and it is adapted to survive in tough conditions because it has thick cuticle, it has a sunken stomata. Then it has hair-like structures which prevents the loss of water, and the leaves of such xerophytes, they roll up. And why do they roll up? They roll up due to shrinkage of special hinge cells. So these plants have special hinge cells, and these hinge cells are a source of hinge. It's a hinge-like structure which rolls up the entire leaf, and since the leaves get roll up, तो आपका जो loss of water है वो prevent हो जाता है. ठीक है? These are all the details that you need to mention for a 4 mark question. Then we have, acha, now the process of transpiration. So transpiration ka question also, acha, it's a very, what do I say, कि यानी फॉर न्यूक्लिक एसिड वी डेट के डीएनए रेप्लिकेशन पे क्वेश्चन आता है या फिर प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस पे. इन द सेम मैनर या तो ट्रांसपिरेशन पे क्वेश्चन आता है फॉर ट्रांसपोर्ट इन प्लांट्स या xerophytes पे आता है. सो दीज आर बेसिकली ऑप्शन बेस्ड क्वेश्चंस. यानी दे डू नॉट गिव यू ऑप्शंस इन योर पेपर, बट अ क्वेश्चन कैन कम ऑन ट्रांसपिरेशन. या तो सिर्फ ट्रांसपिरेशन पर होगा या सिर्फ xerophytes पर होगा या फिर सिर्फ ट्रांसलोकेशन पर होगा. ठीक है. सो दीज आर 3 मेन सब टॉपिक्स दैट यू नीड टू have strong grip on. Either transpiration, they'll give you transpiration, they'll give you xerophytes, or they'll give you the process of translocation. Okay, so these are the 3 subtopics that you need to cover strongly. Now that when they give you this question of transpiration, it is usually of 4 marks as well, and sometimes they give you a 2 mark question in which you just have to write the definition of transpiration. Okay, so this is sufficient for 2 marks, while for 4 marks you need to write everything. Okay, so transpiration you need to start off by explaining what exactly transpiration is. You need to mention that transpiration is a process in which water vapors are lost from plant to the environment by diffusion. So number one, water vapor are lost from the plant to the environment by the process of diffusion down the water potential gradient, and this process takes place through stomata, which are these stomata are present in the lower epidermis. Okay, so transpiration is a process in which water vapor of plant are lost to the environment by the process of diffusion. And then what exactly happens? Yani, this is the process. Yani, you have just described what is transpiration. Now, how exactly this happens is written over here. Okay, water moves up the xylem to replace water lost from heat. Yani, the process of transpiration has already begun, and water vapor have been lost to the environment. So now what will happen? Okay, water will move up the xylem to replace the water which is lost from the heat, yani from transpiration. So water, yani from soil, water will rise through xylem to replace the loss of water, and the air in internal spaces have contact with air outside through stomata. So the air in internal spaces, yani air spaces present in spongy mesophyll, they are in contact with air outside through stomata. And if air inside has high water potential, yani if the leaf has high water potential, then the outside environment, then water vapor will diffuse out. So what basically happens in transpiration, it's written over here, okay, if the water potential of the leaf is higher than the water potential of the environment, then water vapors will be lost to the environment by the process of transpiration through diffusion. Okay? And how is that water continuously? It's replaced continuously with the help of xylem. That whenever water is lost due to transpiration, xylem will always conduct water in order to prevent more transpiration. So, how exactly transpiration takes place? Transpiration is a process, and it takes place via internal spaces. And the internal spaces present in the spongy mesophyll cells, they are in contact with environment outside, and if the water potential of this structure. If the water potential is higher over here, then the outside environment, then water will be lost to the environment by the process of diffusion. Okay, I'm repeating it again and again so that you do not get confused. Then they also ask you to state the factors which affect transpiration. So these are already the factors that we study in O levels. We'll just briefly discuss it. Okay, if wind is a factor, then light, sunlight, temperature, humidity. So for wind, you need to mention that higher the wind pressure, higher will be the transpiration. That's it. For light, you need to, this is a very obvious fact. Okay, whenever light and temperature will be higher, then transpiration will also be higher. Then for humidity, you need to mention that lower the humidity, higher the transpiration will be. So this is the only factor which is inversely proportional. Rest all three factors, wind, light, and temperature, they are directly proportional. Yani ki if they'll be higher, then transpiration will be higher. But if humidity, it's an inversely proportional relationship. If humidity is lower, then transpiration will be higher. ठीक है?